Get connected, technologically at least. Okay, so you're all very welcome this morning. If it's morning in your time zone, it's morning here. So just before I hand over to Nyanavacha, I just want to give a sense of what we'll be doing today. Some people have been asking when the retreat is ending and that. So this morning, Nyanavacha is going to lead us in a meditation. Again, it was originally going to be led by Vasantra, but unfortunately he's unwell. So I'll let Nyanavacha say more about that in a moment. Then we're going to have a break, as usual, for 15 minutes. And after the break, we're going to hear a few different short presentations or short bits of information or updates. And then we'll have a bit more time for a Q&A as well. And then this afternoon, it'll be at the usual time. And the first part of the afternoon session will be the usual inquiry groups. We've been saying for 40 minutes, haven't we, with a 10-minute break. And then the last 40 minutes is a chance for you guys as a group to report out about how the retreat has been, what you want to take away from the retreat, what you want to do next, the usual kinds of reporting out. And then tonight, the last event of the retreat tonight, UK and Irish time at least, will be this evening at 7:30. So I'll give a short talk and then we'll do a closing ritual and meditation, and we'll be finished the retreat then this evening at 8:30 UK Irish time. Whatever time that is in your own time zone. Okay, so that's the plan of what we'll do today. And just one other thing to say is that someone was emailing us asking, are the talks available that we've had all the week? And I'm sure most of you are aware of this, but they are all on the retreat page that you got the link for in the email. So they're all there along with many of the retreat resources. So you can check them all out there. Yep. Okay, so I'll hand over to, and that's the link there that Lizzie has just put in. So I'll hand over to Nyanavacha now to lead us in some meditation.
Thank you, Vajrashura, and a very, very warm welcome from me. And so yes, this morning I am filling in for Vasantra again. I'm sorry that he can't be here. What we planned to do, and what I'm going to try and do, is lead a meditation where all four myths are evoked, incorporated, somehow referred to. And I tend not to talk very much during meditation, so I'm going to try and say as little as possible. So I'll say a little bit about what we're going to do before we meditate, and then I'll lead us in the meditation. So we'll start with some becoming grounded and becoming aware of our body and so forth. Then we'll cultivate metta for ourselves, for everybody here on the retreat, and extend that out to all beings. And then we'll imagine the presence of the Buddha, that we're sitting in the presence of the Buddha. And I just ask you to let the Buddha appear as the Buddha appears to you. That might be in the form of your yidam. He might not appear as a visual image at all. It might just be a sense of presence. But somehow evoke this sense that the Buddha is present with you, with us. The Buddha is always present. The enlightened mind is always present. So somehow evoke that in your own way. And then we'll be receiving blessings. This is a sort of classic thing of a sadhana, isn't it? The Buddha blesses us. I was saying earlier that when we see reality, Prakasha said its function, as it were, is to bless us. This is a profound truth. It's not just an imaginative fantasy. It's a profound experience. It's a truth. So we'll experience the blessings of the Buddha. And again, I'll leave that to you to do in your own way. If in your sadhana there's a way of receiving blessings, light or mantras, then feel free to do that. Or you might find another imaginative way of receiving the blessings into your heart, into your being, and feeling uplifted and transformed by those blessings. The blessings are there to transform us so that we can see beyond our normal limited mind and experience something of the mind of the Buddha. Then there'll be a point where the Buddha, however the Buddha's appeared to you, will dissolve into you. So again, if you do sadhana, the Buddha could dissolve into light and the light could enter you. If it's just a presence that you feel, imagine that presence entering into you. I'll leave it up to you as to how that works for you, but somehow the Buddha enters into us, dissolves into us. The Buddha is within as well as without, of course. And those boundaries, those distinctions don't ultimately exist. So then with the Buddha, as it were, dissolved into us, we'll just sit, we'll let go of all holding on. And if you notice that there is holding on, keep working to let go. Just let go into spaciousness as much as you can. In a way, you don't have to do anything at all. You can work by just relaxing, or you can keep an eye out for where is there holding on, and then softening that holding on if you can. It's up to you again, but there's a emphasis on letting go. And then finally, I'll read some verses to conclude the meditation. I'll read some verses from the confounder of hell, Vajrasattva practice, that evoke absolute bodhicitta, absolute mind, the Dharmakaya, the reality that is always who we really are and what everything really is. So then we'll conclude. So that's the sort of shape of the morning meditation. And we'll be meditating for about 30 minutes, 35 minutes or so. Okay. So setting yourself up for the meditation. Settling into your posture. Maybe beginning by tuning into sounds around you. The sound of my voice, but other sounds you may hear around you. And seeing if you can let them just be sound without any overlay of concept. Or discursiveness. And then perhaps taking a few deeper breaths. And as you breathe out, noticing the points of contact the body makes with the seat under you, with the floor, and allowing the weight of the body to drop through those points of contact. Each out breath, a letting go. And the weight falling down through the floor into the earth. Deeper and deeper into the earth. A sense of being rooted to the earth. And then bringing awareness to the body. And noticing particularly any areas where we habitually hold on in the body. Softening the face, for example. The muscles around the eyes, around the jaw and the mouth, can all soften. And the throat can be open. And seeing if the shoulders, if you can let the shoulders go a little bit more down the sides of the body. A little bit more if you can. And becoming aware of the legs. Imagining the legs becoming heavy and the muscles in the legs softening. And letting go in the legs. And connecting with the sensations of breathing and the movement in the belly and in the chest. The sense of the whole breath body. The energy body. And also noticing how you are in yourself. You want to becoming aware of the heart center, or just noticing what's present in your emotional world, mental world. And see if we can turn towards whatever's present with a gentle, patient, non-judgmental awareness. Connecting with a sense of metta towards yourself, towards whatever's present in your experience, however you are. And then extending that metta outward to all of us on retreat together, all of us here, all of us all over the world who have been tuning into this retreat. And out further to include all beings. just radiating metta outwards to all beings. And in that radiating love, imagining we're in the presence of the Buddha. And the Buddha's love. However the Buddha appears to you. Sitting in the presence of the qualities of the enlightened mind. The compassion, the equanimity, the boundlessness, the energy and freedom. And the wisdom that sees beyond all dualistic delusion. as we open up to the Buddha's qualities, we receive the blessings of the Enlightened One. Into our hearts. Noticing the effect of the blessings. Imagining the Buddha dissolving and being absorbed into us. The radiance, the love, the wisdom, all the qualities of the enlightened mind dissolving into us. And we let go of all effort. And just sit. Nothing to hold on to. No one holding on. Maho. Dharma wondrous strange, profoundest mystery of the perfect ones. Within the birthless, all things take their birth. Yet in what's born, there is no birth. Maho. Dharma wondrous strange, profoundest mystery of the perfect ones. Within the ceaseless, all things cease to be. Yet in that ceasing, nothing ceases. Maho. Dharma wondrous strange, profoundest mystery of the perfect ones. Within the non-abiding, all abides. Yet thus abiding, there abideth naught. Maho. Dharma wondrous strange, profoundest mystery of the perfect ones. In non-perception, everything's perceived. Yet this perceiving's quite perceptionless. Maho. Dharma wondrous strange, profoundest mystery of the perfect ones. In the unmoving, all things come and go. Yet in that movement, nothing ever moves. So coming out of the meditation when you're ready. And we'll have a break for 15 minutes. You're welcome to sit on. We'll have a cup of tea. And we'll come back here 11 o'clock UK time.
So we'll kick off again in a moment. Okay, I think most of us are back as far as I can see. So I'll hand over to Vijayamala first.
Okay, thank you, Vajrashura. Yeah, I didn't get the opportunity to talk a bit more personally last night. I'm so glad we heard from Jnanavacha, but I did think there was a couple of helpful things that I could have said in a personal way about some of my own experience. Well, that would, in a way, I think it sort of helps to set some of the background for our Kula and what we're trying to do with it at the moment. So I thought I would take the opportunity to just share a bit more personally with you about that. So yeah, I want to talk specifically about some of my experience, well, a very particular bit of my experience going to other teachers. I'm going to focus mostly on going to other teachers to learn about sadhana. So just as a background, because obviously not all of you know my background. So yeah, I started having exposure to other teachers after about 20 years of practicing exclusively with Bhante's presentation. I had 17 years in communities and 12 years taking responsibility in right livelihood businesses. Was the finance director of Winterhorse Trading. And like Tejananda and Vasantra, I did very little active going out to find other teachers. It seemed like they arrived on my doorstep. It was more that way round, various openings. There was the curiosity and the interest and the desire to deepen my practice, which I then responded with. And actually sadhana was a bit of an exception. I did actually go out. I had more curiosity, more desire to deepen my practice, and I did go out searching for something with that. So it felt like to me, when I was given my sadhana practice, it was I was given these jewels. It was a very, very mysterious thing. And it also felt like that the sadhana had a very extremely important message, and particularly maybe for me held keys to working more energetically, in my practice. Now some aspects of sadhana just seemed like cultural trappings almost, and it was quite hard to engage with some of these aspects in our day-to-day lives. And one way we attempted to address this at the time was to simplify the sadhanas right down. But for me personally, that took away some of the magic of sadhana. And I did try asking around quite a lot, but I didn't really feel like I got much help opening it all up. And there was plenty even in those days to read about it, but it just I'm not very good at learning through reading. I learn through personal example better, and just reading about sadhana just made it seem even more obscure and distant. And so at that time, because of my connection with Vasantra and my interest particularly in the sadhana of Vajrayogini, which wasn't commonly done in the movement. It wasn't one of the practices Bhante had been given. So I started to visit annually a Lama called Dayab Rinpoche, Tibetan Lama called Dayab Rinpoche. Now, this is a Lama that Vasantra had started consulting in relation to the Vajrayogini practice after, through dialogue with Bhante. But I didn't have my own dialogue with Bhante. Yeah. I didn't have a sense that I could just go and talk to him actually about these things. And it wasn't until quite a lot later on that he specifically asked us to come and talk to him about them. He felt at the time, he felt like quite a remote figure in a way. He was definitely my teacher, but I didn't have much personal contact with him. And I didn't think he'd want to be bothered by my explorations very much. So so I went. I had paid this annual visit to Dayab Rinpoche, and I tried to engage more deeply with the sadhana through a combination of, I suppose it was a combination of development and surrender, but we did a lot of mantra chanting and there was a lot of ritual, but neither of which I sort of understood very well. And in a way, it didn't really sort of increase the depth of my felt connection or deep understanding with sadhana. Over 1 million Vajrayogini mantras later, my relationship with the figure started to get quite dry. Actually, from Dayab Rinpoche, I felt like because of his sort of, who he was in himself, what was most striking, a bit like with Dada Rinpoche, who I had the real privilege of meeting briefly. What I most appreciated and received from him was his sort of, his being, his well, it was bodhicitta really, his sort of, and his presence, but and I also learned quite a lot about how not to run a sangha. It really deeply increased my appreciation of many of the aspects of how we communicate and how we share our experience in Triratna, and how we're taught and encouraged to do that. And many of those aspects I think are probably, taken quite for granted. I grew up in the movement since I was 19. I just thought it was normal to be able to sort of really deeply share one's practice and live one's life. I mean, I'd been in, community and right livelihood for many, many years. And that was just a sort of, this lovely image that Jnanavatra gave us yesterday from the glass bead game of the way that we could live together. And that was just how we breathed. I just took it for granted that we were able to operate like that together. So, and in a way, funnily enough, in terms of the sadhana, it wasn't until quite recently that I sort of started to understand a bit more about how I could work more energetically, with mantra, and how that could affect my practice. And that opened up through quite a different channel. So sadhana at that time, it wasn't the only practice that I was exploring, but I did go quite far in a way in terms of my exploration of highest, what's called a highest tantra practice. and some of it was useful, but I suppose I have quite a strong question about, was it 10 years of dedicated practice useful? Yeah, if that makes sense. And I don't know, I'm not sure about that. So I had another sort of circuitous path, if you like, to exploring Mahamudra teaching. I think I was probably a bit more fortunate about how that unfolded. But both of these, they did also, and this is what I really wanted to share with you, it did create a certain amount of dis-ease, of unease in myself, in my sort of, for my spiritual integrity, if you like. So for me, yeah, dis-ease and almost conflict, really. Well, both for me personally, as well as with some of my friends in the order. So looking back, even though I was probably quite sort of shy, I do regret not having sort of taken the leap to talk more with Bhante, especially once I heard that he really did want us to talk to him about it. By that point, I was on 3-year retreat. I did write him a long letter. Yeah, so I think I went through a series of processes in relation to Bhante. First of all, I found a way of forgiving him. It sounds terrible. I found a way of forgiving him for not being the guru that I wanted him to be. Yeah, I found a way of reconciling that within myself and forgiving him for not being the guru that I wanted him to be, for not being the perfect guru. And that made it sort of a little bit easier for me to engage, and yeah. And I think the next phase came for me, a few people have mentioned Bhante's funeral and how significant that was for them. I think for me that the time around that time that I found most intense was actually meditating before the body, meditating with Bhante's, before the funeral, meditating with Bhante's body. And that was the time when I just felt like he was everywhere. He was in everything. You know, here was his body right in front of me, sort of flesh and blood, but actually Bhante was just everywhere in the room. And as I sat with the body, it became, in a way, it sort of resolved some of my own personal koans and issues. I sort of came to the understanding that my way of serving this everything, this incredible presence, this being, this vision, this truth, however apparently imperfect it was to offer all of my experiences to support a real deepening of meditation practice within our order. And somehow that it came as a sort of very integrative process for me, you know, that actually, yeah, that however imperfect it was, I could, you know, that was my way of doing it. And more recently, and this was somehow came out quite strongly after I heard Jnanavatra last night, I can see that there's another level to it, and that I also, that I also need to forgive myself for not being the perfect disciple, for not being the perfect disciple. So, well, I suppose I mostly wanted to share that because I think you can see that it's not, it's a painful process, this growing, this developing, isn't it? And I learned a lot through the experiences that I've had, through the teachings that I've received. But it would have been so much easier, so much easier if I had access to the same level of teaching in Triratna. Yeah, it would have been so much easier for me. And it seems to me that in recent years, things have changed a lot, and that more and more of those opportunities are opening up, more and more is available within Triratna. Over the last 15 years, I think collectively we filled out some of the areas of our system of practice quite fully. So particularly it's been mentioned over this week in terms of insight practice, also just sitting, sadhana, and we're starting, this is something I'm quite excited about with the help of Dayajoti and Nageshwara, we're starting to open up the whole area of dhyana in what I think is a very creative way. So actually I have to say that over the last couple of years of these retreats, I've been extremely encouraged by just what I've witnessed as the depth and subtleties, both in the team and in some of the leadings through and the interactions of the group that I've witnessed in terms of meditation teaching. So I think we really are developing a stronger body of experience and an increasing reach with that experience. And I just wish my 19-year-old self had access to some of your lead-throughs. I really do. Maybe, I don't want to single anyone out particularly, but I'm going to. Maybe particularly Surya Daya's instruction. You know what? We're just going to enjoy ourselves now. I love that. But yeah, I really wish for my 19-year-old self that she had access to that. And I'm delighted that we're unpacking these things now and that folk coming along now to the centres do get this quality of teaching. Yeah. And I'm also delighted that there's a group of us who are actively encouraging dialogue around different ways of practice and how they can be integrated into the system of practice. Yeah. And I hope together, I'm encouraged with this. I hope together that we can do this in a way which is open and exploratory and encouraging enough to exemplify and honour the pillar of experimentation, yeah, as well as to maintain harmony and cohesion in the order. I do think that if I'd had access to that level of dialogue and interaction, it would have made my journey a little bit smoother and less conflicted and complicated. So that's what I wanted to offer to you all. Over to Dhammarati, I think.
Thanks, Vijayamala. I'm just going to hand over to Dhammarati. Yes, there he is. Okay. Thanks again, Vijayamala, for that very moving words. So over to Dhammarati then.
Thanks very much, Vidrashir, and thanks, Vijayamala. It's very sort of moving hearing such a personal account of what, well, in a way, your development, your relationship to a shared context. And interesting as well to hear your wish for access to that quality of dialogue, a certain quality of dialogue. And kind of that's what I want to talk about. I think I want to say something, just a little bit about putting this retreat in a broader context and thinking about how we might take that quality of dialogue forward, how we might create as more of an ongoing element in our culture, that quality of dialogue. I'm just going to try and get myself off the screen. It's very disconcerting looking at myself. I love that Zoom instruction where it says was it hide self-view? I wish that was a command I had access to in more of my life. So nice to be able to see all of you and a bit more of a sense of the context that I'm speaking to. Last week, or the week before, I was on a retreat that Visantra led on the 7-point mind training. And there was an image that Visantra led that mentioned that really struck me, really sort of resonated with me. And it kind of did it in the context of a meditation. If you don't mind, I'm going to just try and give you a little bit of a flavour of that. He started off, we'd just done the meditation reflecting on one of the verses. Then the particular part of the meditation, it was just in a way pretty familiar instruction just to broaden our awareness out and to be aware of everyone else who is on the retreat and doing the practice. I'm aware I'm still kind of responding to and affected by Vijayamala's presentation. So actually I'm quite happy to have a little bit of a prompt just to keep that in awareness and just to keep my relationship with Vijayamala in my awareness and her presentation. But anyway, in the retreat, in the meditation, we did that as well, broadened it out to include everyone we were meditating with. Then we broadened it out again just to reflect on, in a way, the sort of guru yoga aspect of it, the people from whom we had received the Dharma. And then broadening it out again, Visantra just invoked the whole lineage from the Bante's teachers through the tradition that had handed down the mind training tradition back to Shantideva, back to the Buddha. And there was a little phrase that he used. It was just saying, just get this sense that our own efforts as practitioners are part of a collective effort that's been going on for the last 2,500 years. And we're part of a collective project to liberate beings from suffering. And there was just something really beautiful sitting on top of my bed on my buckwheat cushion and just having a sense that I'm part of a 2,500 year collaborative project to liberate beings from suffering, and having my own modest efforts put in that context. I found it described what I aspired to. It was a really wonderful contextualizing of my own individual practice. I wanted in a bit of a more kind of modest and more prosaic way to talk a little bit about that collective aspect of our practice, bearing in mind the 2,500 year tradition, but looking a bit more specifically about us as a specific order, us as a practice community, and some of the implications of that. I think, sorry, I'm going off script a little bit here, but just a verse from Shantideva quite often comes to my mind, believe it or not. And Shantideva's saying, nirvana is the letting go of all, and my mind seeks nirvana. If I must let go of all, it's best it be given to beings. And there's something in that, I think. There's something, the reflex of letting go of self-clinging is community. in a way, self and other, that relational quality of connection between self and other becomes a more in the foreground of our experience as the self-clinging starts to soften. And I think this aspect of the communal dimension of practice, it's not just an afterthought, it's not what we do as individual practitioners. More and more, that quality of relationship, I think, is the expression of our own maturing practice, and how we deepen our practice, and how our practice comes into relationship with community, how we create the Bodhisattva's act of gathering as an intrinsic part, an intrinsic expression of our own deepening practice. I think it's not an afterthought, it's not subsequent to our individual practice. And I wanted just to sort of try and put this retreat, this whole project, in a bit of historical context. Excuse me if I give you more information than you need. My mind tends to think in terms of these kind of sequences, and to make sense sometimes of where we are and where we're going, it's helpful for me to look at how we got here. And I hope some of you at least find it equally helpful. But I want to go back to 2009, and pretty much, my instructions for my work for the last 10 years came from Bante's discussion in What is the Western Buddhist Order, the paper that came out in 2009. And I think what Bhante was primarily trying to do in that paper, if that's not presumptuous, is anticipating his own death and looking forward, trying to describe the conditions that would let us thrive and deepen as an order, as a practice community. And a really pragmatic thing that he said was, we're a united spiritual community, and that means we need to keep a common body of practice. And then nothing metaphysical. He just said, if everybody's doing different practices, it becomes harder and harder to share experience, and harder to have a sense that we are one order. So that idea that for us to be able to share spiritual experience, that's made easier by a shared framework of practice, without nailing that down too concretely. Following on from that, there was a discussion kicked off in the order as a whole. And actually, personally, I would locate this retreat as part of that ongoing discussion. And the questions that were asked of the order were, for example, how do we maintain a high degree of shared practice, a high degree of commonality on the one hand, while remaining open to the development and evolution of our system of training on the other? How do we make sure that new approaches are faithful to the spirit of the order, have a collective acceptance, but also allow for creativity and also allow for development? And I think that tension between fidelity and creativity, between a kind of receptivity to the tradition that we've learned from, and the kind of responsiveness to our own deepening experience, a responsiveness to the changing needs of the context that we practice in, that's a live dialectic. I think Subhuti, in the paper that he wrote around that time, said perhaps it's a question that can never be finally answered. It's more a matter of setting up a dialogue that allows those different needs, those different aspects of the collective situation to be in relationship, to be in a sort of dynamic communication with each other. I was really struck by Vidyamala's summing up of Jnanavaccha's session last night, where she was talking about, I think, coming out of Jnanavaccha's obvious live relationship with Bhante, and Vidyamala's little aphorism was the importance of communication and not polarization. And I think that kind of communication, that vital mutual responsiveness, to use that language, is the nature of spiritual community. It's our emerging experience, or developing or surrendering experience, whichever myth you want to choose, but our developing experience coming into relationship with that experience of other members of our community. Those questions got picked up by the International Council in 2014. And the International Council came up with a couple of really central principles about the shape that dialogue should take, or sort of needed to take, for us to carry on as a community. And the principles were really kind of summarizing it drastically: principle of right view and a principle of Kalyana Mitrata. And right view meant that, first of all, it was in accord, what we taught, what we practiced was in accordance with the Dharma. And secondly, what we taught and what we practiced, to the extent that we need a shared framework to be an effective community, had to be in a relationship and alignment with Bhante's presentation of the Dharma. That's the sort of root articulation that all of us as order members share. Second point that the International Council made was that there needed to be a quality of Kalyana Mitrata, and again, bringing about this quality of communication. The way it was put and what came out of the International Council, if I can find it, was that we need to create a culture of communication about practice, and particularly a culture of communication about practice and among those teaching in Triratna, and developing a teaching culture that responds to the spiritual needs of people at different levels of experience. And I think that, again, those two poles of fidelity to what we've been given, like loyalty to my teachers, to use that verse from the ordination, and at the same time a kind of responsiveness, culture of communication that honours our own deepening experience and that's responsive to the people that we're teaching. That they were the parameters that the International Council discussion laid out. The Sikkha project was asked to take that discussion forward, and if I may, that sort of brings us to this retreat and what's happening on this retreat. The Sikkha project was asked to look quite pragmatically at how we teach and how we support practice in Triratna. And I think if you look at this, this retreat comes out of the work of what we've called the meditation kula. And I think you've got a number of things that this retreat's trying to do. You've got a very pragmatic one again. The meditation kula has been asked to look at how we teach, to advise on how we would teach more effectively. So that strand is there very explicitly in the retreat, just trying to give advice on how we could approach meditation teaching. But I think it's also trying to create this culture of communication around practice. It's been quite striking for me that the meditation kula itself, the kula at the minute involves Jnanavacha and Vajrashura, involves Tejananda, Vidyamala, Vijayamala, Vasantra, and me. And that I've been quite struck how little some of our most experienced teachers are in dialogue with each other. I think quite often people teach solo. They teach beautifully, they teach really effectively, but often it's not in a lot of dialogue. And just sort of watching such experienced practitioners come into dialogue with each other, and on the most simple level, experience starting to be shared, I think in itself is a valuable thing. I think a second element of just having a context of this retreat where you've had the people on the team doing the presentations, and you can really hear the weight of their experience. Like, I think all of us learn. I certainly learn from listening to the people presenting. But I think the discussion groups that have been set up, the breakout groups, the practice groups, literally, we've got hundreds of years, if not thousands of years of meditation practice and teaching between us. And having a context where our experience comes into relationship and our experience gets shared is a really intrinsic part of a culture, I think, that we need to really support and foster more widely in the order and movement. And we're having a bit of a discussion about this whole question of other teachers and the team. And one of the pragmatic points that got made was we're in a very different place from where we were at 10 years ago, 15 years ago, when this discussion started. And I hope people can feel from this retreat just what a body, what a depth of experience is available in the order and movement now. And from a pragmatic point of view, just in terms of us as a coherent practice community, I hope that our first port of call as practitioners wanting to deepen our experiences, that we draw on the resources that are available collectively within the order, within our own community. But although I think this retreat is a really sort of helpful tool for passing on that experience, one of the questions that we've had in the team is how we provide that kind of support ongoingly. And one of the suggestions that's come up in the last few months, before I get there, two kind of significant discussions going on in the Kula. One is that over the last few months, there have been a couple of instances of people starting to develop teaching that's a bit innovative, to use that word. I'm a little bit, just to speak personally, I'm a little bit shocked. I always think of myself as, being, my background is slightly on the well-mannered revolutionary left. And, like when I was a teacher, that was my kind of background. And I'm kind of interested just to watch as I get older, as my experience in this community has developed. I'm definitely on the how do we preserve our tradition end of a conversation. I've definitely become, I've seen the value of a conservative pole, if I may use a swear word in our discussion. But one of the things that's been happening recently is a couple of people who have been looking at more innovative approaches to teaching, naturally coming to that Kula, wanting to discuss it. And actually, it's been a real privilege being able to sit in on that kind of conversation. Like to listen to Tejananda or Visandra or Vijayamala or Vidyamala, the different perspectives that they've been able to bring to that dialogue. I think setting up a dialogue that I hope that the teachers have found helpful. I hope the other members of the Kula have found useful. But I think we've really needed a forum like that, where sort of developing teachings have got a way of being unpacked a bit, their implications thought through, and people engaging with them from a situation of depth. Anyway, it's been very interesting seeing that develop. And what I hope that becomes is just a particular instance of something that's happening at every level of our culture. That, in your chapter, at centre level, you're exploring your own experience, exploring how that experience best gets communicated. Anyway, it's been interesting watching the meditation kula almost sort of naturally take that role in relationship to the teaching that's going on in kind of movement wide. The second thing that I wanted to mention, though, is a question that's come up about how we give anybody who's involved in teaching meditation access to peer support and access to guidance from people who are more experienced than we are. So one of the discussions that's been happening in the Kula, and one of the discussions I hope that we can take forward in the next couple of months, is setting up a kind of support network so people have access to that kind of experience at a peer level from people who are more experienced. The discussion really kind of just started in the Kula, but so we're trying to think, how would you set that up in a way that's effective, in a way that's sustainable, in a way that's realistic about the resources that we've got. But I'd really like to see us set up that kind of ongoing context for a culture of communication around practice. And I think, going back to our ordination, at the moment of ordination, it really strikes me, all of the ordination acceptance verses are about relationship, that the loyalty to my teachers, harmony with friends and brethren, benefit of all beings, and depending how you think about enlightenment, all of those acceptance verses are about how our individual experience comes into relationship. And just thinking about how we create those relationships between ourselves and how we support each other in making the Dharma available more widely is central, I think, to our health as a community. I wanted to finish by just saying thank you to the people who have participated in this retreat. I want to say thank you to the meditation Kula. Again, just to name them all: Vajrashura, Jnanavacha, Tejananda, Vijayamala, Vidyamala, Vasantra. I've been so impressed by that group individually and collectively. It's been such a harmonious group to work with. And again, I think that's a bit of a mark of maturity of practice. I've been really, really grateful for their generosity. But all of that very busy group of people have given their time to the ongoing work of the Kula and given this week to make their experience available to each of us. And I think you're looking at a kind of modelling of this project of making the Dharma available. I love Tejananda's remark about, well, I've spoken for so long, I'm sorry, but kind of helping other people to wake up. I'm really grateful to the Meditation Kula for making their experience available. And I'm really grateful and appreciative to all of you, actually, as part of this collaborative project to come into relationship with each other and to make the Dharma available as part of this project of liberating beings from suffering. I confess my faults. I'm sorry to have spoken for so long, but I did want to say a bit, at least, about the work of the Kula. Hand back to Vajrashura and give him the problem of how we spend our last 15 minutes together.
Great, thanks Dhammarati for that. That was really, really fascinating. And Dhammarati is also a valued and dynamic member of that Kula as well. So I want to rejoice in him for that. I just want to check, Vijayamala, how long do you want for your little bit at the end?
Maybe five minutes.
Okay, so I'm not quite sure how to follow on from that, but we do have 10 minutes of up to 10 minutes of space. If anyone has any questions or comments, it can be about anything that's just said there. It can be about anything from the retreat. and I'll likely direct your questions onto one of the other members of the Kula. But so you can raise your hand again as usual if you want. Yeah. So Vidyamala, if you want to unmute yourself.
Yes, put my video on as well. Thank you. I just wanted to clarify something from Dhammarati's talk. I'm fairly confident I understood it, but I just wanted to clarify because at one point you said that a couple of order members or groups of order members had recently been taking a more innovative approach to teaching. And then very soon after that, you said you were shocked. And I wanted to double check whether you were shocked that people were taking an innovative approach to teaching. Because you then went on to talk about how you'd found yourself holding a conservative position. And I thought, well, probably you were saying you were shocked to find yourself holding a conservative position as an old revolutionary. You see what I mean?
Thanks for clarifying that, Vidyamala. Yeah, I'm shocked at the trajectory of my own life, nothing to do with the content of what was being brought for discussion. So okay. I'm sorry if that was unclear. No, in fact, the discussions that we had, I think were both about very kind of thoughtful, spiritually serious engagements with the Dharma and with meditation teaching. So no, it was totally self-referential.
Okay, that's what I assumed.
Great, thanks Dhammarati and Vidyamala. So Atulya Mitra.
Hello, yes, thank you very much for all of it. I was just quite excited with some of the things that you were saying there in the last part of your talk, Dhammarati. The support network really jumped up at me. You talked about peer level support from people with more experience is what I've written down. I'm wondering how you were envisioning that, peer support within the order, or is this something that we'd be bringing to Mitras, et cetera, et cetera? Have you any thoughts?
The reason that I didn't say anything more specific is I think what we're still kind of trying to think through some of the details and some of the implications in the Kula. The kind of picture that I've got, like a very simple thing at local level would be for order members who are, well, order members and chapters speaking more about their practice. This is something in our chapter we've tried to find sort of roots into. I think, for example, order members involved in teaching, talking more about that qualitative end of their own practice and about how it is communicated effectively. And I'm sure that already happens very effectively in some centres, but just to think how peer groups would engage with each other, both to look at supporting deepening practice and supporting more effective teaching. And the bit that we're trying to figure out is how we use some of the more experienced, inverted commas, teachers within the movement and trying to set up a bit of a tree, a bit of a network that supports people's practice and also supports them in teaching. But if you don't mind, I think what I hope we're going to be able to do is to sort of write to centres and write to participants in this retreat in the next month or two with some tentative suggestions about what that might look like. And again, nothing obligatory about it, but to the extent that people would find that kind of support helpful, we'll come out, I think, with a couple of tentative proposals about how that might work and what that might look like. So if I can ask for your patience for a month or two.
Great.
Thank you.
So Suvarna Jyoti.
Actually, yes, thank you. That was completely almost follows what I was going to ask about. I was going to ask pragmatically whether the Kula might be able to put something into writing, because I'm involved in involved in teaching at 2 centres, and what I'm hearing from you now is like I didn't really realise all of this was going on. Maybe I should have done. And in one of the centres that I teach in, it's harder to get going with a culture of order members supporting each other to teach. And I was struck at a conversation recently with someone. I said, oh, well, we've got this quality control thing when we begin to introduce GFR mitras into teaching, but as soon as they cross the great divide into the order, it's like it's somehow tricky for people to have those conversations with each other. So from a culture change point of view, I think it would be fantastic to have a sort of galvanizing message from the meditation cooler saying, look, this is, you know, what we're all trying to do. And there was like 100 order members and we're all trying to do this, so that maybe I can try to be a part of changing that culture a bit more within that particular centre. So I'd be really grateful to receive that email you were talking about, Dhammarati. Yeah, with a request that it has a flavour of a sort of, you know, let's all try and get behind this in our own different ways, rather than it turning into a sort of, there'll be some people that engage with developing their teaching skills, and there'll be some people that, you know, would rather eat their own head. So, you know, and then you get this kind of two-tier system within a centre, and then how do you manage all that? Anyway, that was all.
Great. Thanks, Ivana, Jody. That's all, yeah, really good suggestions. And I think we do need to let people know more about what we do. I mean, I'm just going to share a link in the video, in the chat rather, and it doesn't tell you anything that you haven't just heard from Dhammarati, but it is a video that we recorded just to let people know more of what we're doing in the Sikkha Kula, and feel free to share that with whoever. But we will have to, part of our setting up of whatever networks are set up, the mentoring networks, will be publicity and how we get the word out to the order, which is always an interesting question. Yeah. Do you want to say any more on that, Dhammarati, or will we? No. Savannah Vera?
Okay, I just have a slightly different kind of question. I thought the retreat was great, it was excellent, and I deeply appreciated the international flavour of it, the international sensitivity, being sensitive to time zones, being sensitive to language. But one question that came up for me that I wanted to ask is, since we're a united order, why weren't any Indian order members on the retreat? Is that something that you would consider inviting them on future retreats? That's my question to you.
I can't quite answer your question straight off the top of my head, because I can't quite remember if it was a general invitation or if it was specifically targeted outside of India. There would be no reason not to have Indian order members here, and I think we did work out the time zones with like they were included in the time zones if they wanted to form groups. I guess the other thing to say is that there is a kind of a Sikkha project in India as well, working relatively independent of the Sikkha outside of India, and there is a lot of training going on there that they're doing themselves. That's the only thought I can really respond with. I'd be delighted to have more of our Indian brothers and sisters here as well. Dhammarati, do you have any other thoughts on it?
No, again, I'm not sure how specifically it was communicated, Savannah Vera, but there is an independent, I think what we decided was the kind of the cultural issues and the levels of experience in India are so distinct that they decided that they would set up their own Sikkha project, which is run by, actually, excuse me, I've forgotten, but they do have their own independent project. Between the two projects, there's some communication, but I think this retreat would definitely be open, but I think there are enough kind of divergences and enough different needs for it not always to be the most helpful support for them.
And we have done some training with India separately. So, I mean, Yanavacha and others were involved with teaching young mitras and order members there how to teach meditation, how to teach online courses. So we have done work with the Indian order there as well. But I know that they take teacher training very seriously in India. They've been very active in that. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Your replies.
Great. So I'm going to hand over then to Vidyamala to finish out this session. So if we can have her spotlighted instead of us, that would be great. Yep.
Great. So thanks everybody very, very much for everything you've shared in this session. Very, very helpful. And the whole retreat, of course, which hasn't finished. That's another thing to say. We've still got the afternoon and this evening. But I'm just going to do another or create another opportunity for us to share some of our money with Adhisthana. And, you know, because sharing is what we're talking about. I mean, personally, I think money is like water. I've got quite a strong sense of this, that money is meant to flow, and that when money gets all blocked up, we get problems in the world. And that I've sort of lived by this principle for a long time, and I'm always fine financially. I sort of let it come in and let it go out, and let it come in and let it go out, and all just sort of flows around. And I think that is the most helpful response to money. Just to say already a huge thank you that we've heard this morning that already you have donated £7,895 collectively to this event, which is amazing, absolutely amazing. So huge thank you to that. And it would be wonderful if we could raise even more. And I was thinking, well, what is it we're giving to? That's what I've been reflecting on. What are we giving to? Is it people? Is it the place? Is it a transaction? Are we asking you to give some money because you've appreciated what we've given? So it's definitely not a transaction, to make that very, very clear. We have all given completely freely, and I think it's fair to say on behalf of the team, joyfully. We've all given freely and joyfully. This is what we've all chosen to do with this week of our lives, with big open hearts. And I have learned so much. You know, I love coming on these things because I learn so much. I learn from the other team members, and I learn from all of you, and I've grown and developed as a human. And so it's not we're not asking you to give money for us at all. And so I was thinking about Adhisthana, and I don't know how long Adhisthana's been there. Is it maybe 2012, Dhammarati, something like that it was bought?
Yeah, bought in 2012, open 2013.
Yeah, so 2012, so it's not even 10 years that what was a school with big railings up around the buildings, and, you know, it was a beautiful potential, but it was very much potential as opposed to actual when it was purchased. And within 10 years, I think it's becoming a thin place. So in the Celtic tradition, they talk about thin places. And I looked up this morning, what's a thin place? And there's a really beautiful definition. It's those rare locales where the distance between heaven and earth collapses. Those rare locales where the distance between heaven and earth collapses. Obviously, we have to interpret that, you know, in our own way as Buddhists. But Yanavacha talked about this kind of notion that we become kind of transparent beings, so that the light of the bodhicitta, of the dharmadhatu, of the unconditioned, of the absolute, of reality, of love, however you want to articulate it, that we become. We don't get in the way, and that this is pouring out into the world. So we can do that individually. But I think also we have places that do that. We have places in the world where love and truth are able to get through more easily. And we need sacred spaces in the world. I think the world needs it even more now than ever, because the world can feel so sort of hard-edged and functional and oppressive. So to have places where we can go, where we can participate in the sacred, I think is very, very precious. So I think it's astonishing that within 10 years, we are actually creating collectively a thin place. And, you know, that, like money in a way, thin places don't need money in order to function, but thin places need money in order to, you know, pay the gardener. Well, no one gets paid hardly anything at Adhisthana, so don't worry about that. But Sangadeva works tirelessly, and the garden is part of the thin place. You know, there's the team, there's the tech, there's all that sort of stuff. And of course, we need money for all that. But I would be absolutely heartbroken if Adhisthana wasn't there in the world. I moved to Ledbury to be near Adhisthana because when Adhisthana opened, we did a puja. So I'd driven down from Manchester. I wasn't planning to move at that point. We did a puja, and I had this kind of vision of there being a massive big hole in the sky above Adhisthana, and the light, oh my God, I'm going to cry now. The light was just pouring through, and it was going out into the world in these enormous kind of rolling pinwheels of light. It was very, very powerful, like great big pinwheel scones. Do you get pinwheel scones? Anyway, or hay bales, something, there was something sort of spinning, full of light. It was just rolling over the hills and the dales and the mountains and the rivers. And there was a kind of hole, there's a hole, I feel there's a hole in the sky above Adhisthana in a certain kind of way, and the light is pouring down. And that's why I decided to move, because I thought I want to participate in keeping that doorway open. So that's what I feel my main function or my main role is, to try to keep the door in the sky above Adhisthana open. So if you give money, you are enabling this thin place, this place where perhaps, I mean, this is my experience, there's a doorway in the sky and the light is pouring through. You're helping that to stay open. And well, great. Sorry, I'm going to get emotional. You know, what greater thing can any of us do with this short, precious, complicated lives that we all have? You know, these painful, tortured, brilliant, beautiful lives. What better thing can we do than to create the conditions for the doorway in the sky to stay open, and to enable generations and generations and generations of people to come and participate in that beauty and that wonder. So I would just encourage you to just give generously. I asked if I could do this Dana appeal before the break, so you can just go straight off. You don't even have to think, oh, I'll do that after the next session. You can go straight off now, click on the link, which is going to be posted in the, there it is. Just do it now, just do it now, give what you can. If you can't give anything, that's absolutely fine. You know, you've given your presence, which is also an enormous gift. If you can give lots, then why not? Why not? Yeah. And, you know, in the pandemic, we talk a lot about how awful it's been, which it has been, and how people have lost their jobs and all that sort of stuff. But there's also what the economists call, I love this, the economists call it pent-up demand. That there's a lot of us, and I'm in this category, who have a fixed income, who have sat at home and saved money over the last year because we've not been able to do anything. I've saved a fortune on petrol, haven't had any holidays. So if you've actually saved money, why not give it to the sky door so we can all dance in that space? Yeah. So I won't say anything more because I don't want to run over time. But yeah, just do it now. And if you don't give anything, that's also absolutely beautiful and completely fine. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thanks, Vidyamala. Another translation of Adhisthana. Yeah. I think Dhammarati turned off his camera there because there was a little tear coming to his eye. Great. Look, that's it for this morning. So all you have to do this morning then is donate, and we'll see you back at 4 p.m. UK and Irish time, whatever that is in your local situation. And we'll see you. The retreat's far from over yet, so we have a few more things to do. So thanks to all the speakers this morning, and we'll see you soon.